respected PGPEM Chairperson Gopal sir, respected Mahadev sir, Professor Mahadevan sir, respected all the professors, faculties present here, respected all the delegates who have come so far, and all the alumni, all the students, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. I am Sambit Patnaik. So today, the great session that we are going to have on leadership and spirituality. So I would like to first give a short bio about our speaker. Shri Chanchalapathi Das, Senior Vice President, ISKCON Bangalore, Vice Chairman and Trustee, Akshaya Patra Foundation, Governing Body, Member GBC Society of the Hare Krishna Movement, President, Vrindavan Chandrodaya Mandir Trust. Chanchalapathi Das has been working in the field of spiritual education since 1984 and social development since 2000. Although he had been passionate about science since his school days, he became introduced to Indian spirituality as an undergraduate student in PSG College of Technology, Coimbatore. Impressed by the profound concepts of spirituality, he pursued the same even more vigorously while doing his master's program in electrical communication engineering at Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. He joined ISKCON in 1984, became involved in Akshaya Patra in 2000, which has become the largest school meal program feeding over 1.8 million underprivileged children in 12 states and 2 union territories. That is spread across 51 locations in more than 16,000 government and government-aided schools in this country. He was able to combine his values of compassion from his spiritual learning with his education in technology and apply the same to create a social development organization like the Akshaya Patra Foundation. He continues to research, teach, and talk extensively on spirituality, social development, and the intersection of science and spirituality. So with that, I would kindly request Speaker Sir and Professor Mahadevan Sir to come on stage and light the lamp so that we can begin this auspicious occasion. Now I kindly request Speaker Sir and Mahadevan Sir to be seated. With that, I think we can begin this session. So kindly request Speaker Sir to start and enlighten us on this topic. Thank you.
Om Ajnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militan Ena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatharini Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Very pleased to be amidst all of you. And I had come here some years ago and made a presentation on our program, Akshaya Patra. And I'm happy to be here today to make another kind of a presentation on leadership and spirituality. There is a verse in the Bhagavad Gita which talks about actually the spirituality and spiritual knowledge is especially meant for the leaders in the society. Krishna says, Evam parampara praptam imam rajarshayo viduhu sakala neha mahata yogo nashta parantapa. Commenting on this, Acharyas have mentioned that the use of the word Raja Rishi, meaning that they were leaders, but they were saintly leaders. And because leaders have a tremendous influence in the society, they can create an impact, they can alter the course of lives of people, they can craft policies which can influence a large number of people. And so they must have a spiritual framework which influences their thinking to maximize good for the people and even be prepared to sacrifice for themselves. And in our Indian tradition, recognizes three kinds of leaders. Actually, Indian traditional system recognizes three power centers in the society. There is the knowledge power center, and there is the administrative power center, and there is the wealth power center. And there are leaders who inhabit in all of these centers. And all of them have to be spiritually trained, spiritually cognizant, spiritually well-versed, so that whether they are dealing with knowledge, perspectives in the society, narratives in the society, or they are dealing with resources and people, or they are involved in creating wealth and managing wealth, all of them should have this background and should have this knowledge so that they can do better and influence the society in a more positive way. I'm not sure if you have heard of this Professor Jordan Peterson, a Canadian clinical psychology professor, very confident about everything that he talks about. Interesting professor. This is what he had to say. This world is a terrible place to live. You will experience miseries one after another despite your best efforts to avoid them. You must have a purpose, meaning, and direction in life, and that should be noble and sublime. Something that is worth pursuing, something that gets you out of bed every morning, not just pursuit of happiness or wealth or security, because those pursuits are going to disappoint you in life. It's a catastrophe to not have a large, grand purpose in life. That's one of the things spirituality does. Brings a purpose, brings meaning, brings a certain vision. And not just a purpose and a vision or a meaning, but something that's very grand, something that's very noble. Lacking that, if we have to just goal of life is just about, it's not that we must not pursue happiness, pursue wealth, pursue career. That's a given thing. But while we do all of that, and we should do it well too, because that's the basics and you cannot negotiate in this world without those basic things. But apart from that, there is something, a larger than life purpose and meaning that has to motivate and drive us. If I were to stop in front of your campus here and stop any car and say that I'm doing a small survey, I want to know where you are driving, where are you heading? And people will say, I am driving to the shopping mall, or I'm driving home, I'm trying to pick up my child in a school, or something. Every car driver would tell me where they are heading. If you were to stop a car and ask the driver, so where are you heading? I'm just doing a small survey. And if the driver were to say, I just don't know, I'm just drifting and driving around, we would think it is absurd, isn't it? So in the same way, if we are or if the person says, I'm driving to follow the traffic rules, and I have some gas in the car, and to exhaust that I'm driving, it would look absurd. In the same way, the societal norms exist that we have to, take care of ourselves, our families, and our community, and all of that. And that's a given thing. But even more than that, while you follow the traffic rules and all of that, you have an objective that you are pursuing. In the same way, our life needs a grander, larger purpose, and something that motivates us, drives us every day, and that just cannot be mere pursuit of happiness and security and those kind of things. And that's what Professor Jordan was mentioning. I would like to share another example. About 50, 60 years ago, Albert Einstein made a statement. I'm actually not interested in this equation or that spectrum. Those are details. I'm really interested to know how God created this universe. That was 50 years ago, probably. In recent times, another very celebrated scientist is Stephen Hawking. And he wrote a book. I'm sure it's a bestseller. A lot of people have. It's the most bought book, most sold book, but rarely read book, I think. A Brief History of Time. I got 3 copies of it. Different people presented that to me. Stephen Hawking and many other scientists were working on a problem, what was called the grand unification theory. Even in my college days, I used to hear talks about it, and in Bangalore there was one Nobel Prize winner who talked about it, and I remember that 30 years ago. Scientists are still working on that, and Stephen Hawking gave a different name to that theory, and he called that the theory of everything. with a capital T and a capital E. Because that was meant to explain everything in the universe. Basically, scientists have identified 4 fundamental forces, 4 fundamental energies, which makes the universe the way it is. And the scientists are trying to find out if those 4 energies and 4 forces can be further reduced to one single force. That's the grand unification theory, and that explains the universe. And that's why there is a biopic on Stephen Hawking, and it was called The Theory of Everything. In the concluding paragraph of this book, A Brief History of Time, Stephen Hawking says, if we were to come up with this complete theory, the theory of everything, the grand unification theory, and then he says that grand unification theory must not be some complex, abstract, advanced mathematics that only scientists and a few people can understand. It must be so simple and elegant that scientists, common people, housewives, everyone can sit around a table and talk about it. It should be so simple and elegant to describe the universe. And then he says that if we were to have that theory, that would be the triumph of human intellect, because then we would know why we exist and why the universe exists. And then we would have known the mind of God. Almost 95% accurate quote I'm recalling. The interesting contrast between what Einstein said and what Stephen Hawking said is that Einstein's question was how God created this universe. And that's what I want to know, he said. Stephen Hawking's question is a few notches even higher. He asked the question, why? Not the how question, but the why question. Why we exist and why the universe exists. What is the purpose of our existence? What is the purpose of the universe's existence? What's the objective of this? There's another professor, Paul Davis, an Australian professor. He brings up another argument. We know that scientists are studying this world last 500 years or so, and they're trying to understand this world. He asks an interesting question. We study this universe, but a very fundamental question is, why does the universe exist at all? Why does something exist instead of nothing? So these are very important questions about why this world exists and why we exist. In fact, when they read my small introduction, you must have heard that I was very passionate about science, and I'm to some extent even now passionate about science. And then in my school days and college days, but I never expected that I will have this hairstyle and this kind of robes someday when I grow up. There was a rather non-linear transition that happened in my life too. I found that at some point when I started reading Indian spirituality, I found that the very profound questions that science is dealing with was actually the very profound questions that Indian spirituality, Indian traditional knowledge systems had also dealt with. The methodology was different, the approach was different, but it was actually that. But, as we are all exposed to Western systems of education, so I had a bias. And I was always very cynical and skeptical about these systems, and then I continued to pursue Somehow I was fortunate that I didn't fall out of it. So, Indian spirituality is also about providing a certain understanding about the purpose of the universe, purpose of the creation, purpose of all of us. And that definitely infuses a new energy in life. There is one interesting quote by Mark Twain. 2 most important days in your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why. Most people don't come to the second important day in life. I'm here in a very prestigious business school, addressing all business school students. How can I not quote something from another world's prestigious business school? 2 professors from Harvard Business School wrote an essay about 4 years ago. And that essay was about purpose for a leader. How when a leader has purpose, that helps him navigate, that helps him make better decisions, that helps him to be a better leader. I'm reading from the essay, some excerpts. Over the past 5 years, there's been an explosion of interest in purpose-driven leadership. Academics argue persuasively that an executive's most important role is to be a steward of the organization's purpose. Business experts make the case that purpose is a key to exceptional performance, while psychologists describe it as the pathway to greater well-being. Doctors have even found that people with purpose in their lives are less prone to disease or respond better to treatment. Purpose is increasingly being touted as the key to navigating the complex, volatile, ambiguous world we face today, where strategy is ever-changing and few decisions are obviously right or wrong. Despite this growing understanding, however, a big challenge remains. In our work, training thousands of managers at organizations from GE to the Girl Scouts, and teaching an equal number of executives and students at Harvard Business School, we have found that fewer than 20% of leaders have a strong sense of their own individual purpose. Even fewer can distill their purpose into a concrete statement. They may be able to clearly articulate their organization's mission. Think of Google's, to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Or Charles Schwab's, a relentless ally for individual investor. But when asked to describe their own purpose, they typically fall back on something generic and nebulous. Help others excel, ensure success, empower my people. Just as problematic, hardly any of them have a clear plan for translating purpose into action. As a result, they limit their aspirations and often fail to achieve their most ambitious personal and professional and personal goals. From Purpose to Impact by Nick Craig and Scott Snook, Harvard Business Review. The last few decades that I have been involved quite rigorously in spirituality, what I have found is that spirituality gives a grand purpose of life. and an even grander purpose of the creation. I would like to share with you what happens in the Bhagavad Gita, first and the early part of the second chapter of the Gita. This part is pretty much Arjuna speaking. Krishna begins to speak from the second chapter onwards. And it's the story of Arjuna's dilemma. The Pandavas returned from exile and they asked their cousin for their share of the kingdom. And Duryodhana refused. Krishna, who was their common cousin, traveled from Dwaraka to Hastinapura and said that I will mediate. And he went to Duryodhana and asked for the fair share of the kingdom that the Pandavas were due to get. And Duryodhana said, no. Krishna negotiated further and asked, can you give 5 villages for the 5 Pandavas? For which Duryodhana said, I will not give as much land or kingdom as much as even a pin can pierce. So the battle was inevitable. Pandavas had just returned from exile and they had no kingdom, they had no army. They went around and asking other kings to support them, and there were many kings who rallied with their cause, and they said that we will give our armies. Duryodhana also went around rallying his cause, that how he should not give the kingdom, share the kingdom with the Pandavas. And there were many kings who supported him. And so they also offered their support. And the battle of Kurukshetra was about to begin. And we all know Krishna, being a cousin and related to both, he said that I will not participate. And he remained neutral, and he was only becoming a charioteer for Arjuna. And Arjuna and Krishna, as cousins, contemporaries, he said, Krishna, drive the chariot, I want to see who have assembled to fight. And then when Krishna drove the chariot and Arjuna saw who all have assembled, suddenly he spotted his grandfather. And it was his grandfather who had cared for them when they were young. And then he spotted his teacher, Drona, who had taught him how to fight. And then he started spotting more and more his cousins and this and this and that. And then he turns to Krishna and says, what's happening, Krishna? And then he gives a series of reasoning why he should not fight. If you carefully see the reasons that Arjuna gives very morally sound reasons. Arjuna gives very ethical reasons. Arjuna gives very humanitarian reasons. Arjuna even gives dharmic reasons. Arjuna says, Krishna, they have become overpowered by greed for kingdom. Should we also respond with our greed for kingdom? Can we not respond with more grace? Better I go to the forest. They are my superiors, my teacher, my grandfather. They are the ones who have actually blessed me with all this learning. And they are pujarha. I must be showering flowers at their feet. But how dare I stand here ready to shoot arrows at them? What's wrong with me? And if this battle were to happen, so many soldiers from my side and their side will be killed. So many men killed. And what will happen to their families? What will happen to their children? What will happen to their wives when the breadwinner in the family, from a traditional Indian society, he's talking, when the man is killed, then what will happen to the family? And what will happen to the women? They will not be protected. And when there is no protection from the husband, there will be all kinds of perpetrators of evil in the society. And because of that, there will be so many problems. And I will be the cause of all of this. So if you carefully see the reasoning that Arjuna gives, you may almost conclude, what's there? Yes, this war should not happen. Let Pandavas go back to the forest. And that's the end of Bhagavad Gita. What actually happens is, Krishna now presents a certain perspective of life, a certain purpose of life, a certain purpose of the entire creation. And he invokes that new perspective and describes the Bhagavad Gita. And at the end of hearing all this, some scholars estimate that it must have taken about 45 minutes for Krishna to speak. Those 700, actually they're not 700, some verses are description of many other things. So, at the end of that, Arjuna became suffused with new energy and a new understanding about life. He saw things from a different perspective, a different motivation, a different purpose. And Arjuna, who had set aside his bow and arrow, declining to fight, he said, Nashta moha smrutir labdva tvat prasadan mayachyuta. Stitoham gata sanghosmi karishye vachanam tava. Now I am ready to fight Krishna. So Krishna brought about this kind of a transformation in Arjuna by a new perspective, a new purpose that Krishna taught in the Gita. When I say Krishna presented a new perspective, something that surpasses moral, ethical, humanitarian, even dharmic considerations, it does not mean the new perspective is not immoral or unethical. It is something that transcends all of that perspective. Like my spiritual mentor used to give an example. The perspective, the knowledge that Krishna has given in the Bhagavad Gita is so elevated and so exalted. It includes all other understanding. It's just like, suppose you have 1 lakh rupees. It means you also have 1,000 rupees. It also means you have 10,000 rupees. It includes all of that. So the perspective that Krishna presented was so much more elevated. It was morally, ethically, from humanitarian consideration, even more sublime and noble. Now, how does Krishna do that? What was it that Krishna told Arjuna that shook up Arjuna? And from all those sound considerations that he had, that why he should not fight, changed to his readiness to fight. To understand that, let's go back in time about 5,000 years ago. How it was in our country. 5,000 years ago, definitely there was no motor cars and roads and transportation, all of that. It was very, very pastoral India, agricultural, agrarian India. At that time, I'm saying 5,000 because 5,000 years ago, there was an epochal change, what is known as the Yugantara, a change of Yuga, from Dwapara Yuga to beginning of Kali Yuga. And prior to Kali Yuga, in Dwapara Yuga, there was a system of knowledge in our country, and that knowledge was being passed on in an oral tradition. Now, this entire corpus of Vedic knowledge, in fact, today if you ask somebody what are the Vedas, they would say Vedas are Hindu scriptures. Just like Bible is for a Christian or a Quran is for a Muslim. This is scriptures for the Hindus. But actually, if you see the etymology of the word Veda, it comes from the word with, to know. It actually means knowledge. Vedas simply meant knowledge. It was not, actually there were no Hindu, all those kind of considerations at all at that time. It was the knowledge in the society. And there was a certain corpus of knowledge. In fact, 5,000 years ago, there was not even a written habit, writing habit. It was transmitted in an oral tradition. In fact, it is said that at the dawn of Kali Yuga, the writing habit emerged. Why? Because the sages at that time, who were custodians of this knowledge, realized that people in Kali Yuga are not going to be so intelligent that they cannot grasp this knowledge through an oral tradition. They will be so disturbed about their own lives. Prayen alpaishaha sabhya kalavasmin yuge janaha manda sumanda matayor manda bhagyahya upadritaha. They'll be so disturbed always in their life, because spirituality requires a certain serenity, certain tranquility within ourselves too, because you have to reflect on certain profound concepts of life. And people are very disturbed in Kali Yuga, and I'm sure you're all aware of that. I was reading a newspaper some years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and the front page, there was news that Wipro has posted their results, and the results said that the quarter they had made some, I don't remember the figures, but fabulous figures, some 4,000 crores or something like that, profits. But then it said that the senior management of Wipro, they are all having sleepless nights. So I was wondering, 4,000 crores in a quarter and they're having sleepless nights? Because their competition made 10% more profit, and so on. So you can imagine this world, and the world that all of you are part of, is a world of a lot of anxiety and tension and chasing deadlines and targets and all of that. So life, in every strata of life, people have their own kinds of anxieties that they are battling with. So, envisaging that Kali Yuga is going to be this kind of a situation, they realized that we have to put this into written form. And for the first time, the corpus of Vedic knowledge, which was being transmitted here and there in different parts of our country, you can imagine how it would have been. There would be a guru there would be an acharya in some other part of the country, and they would have a small number of students, and they would be imparting that lesson. That was the kind of a situation. And occasionally these acharyas would also travel the length and breadth sharing this knowledge. And it was a very rigorous knowledge tradition that existed. There was debate, discourse, arguments. It was very intellectual. So this would happen, but then they realized that now we have to put it in a written form. Actually, you see how we have learned in our school and college a certain perspective. Writing habit came about, they say, 3,000 years ago. And we are told that the emergence of the writing habit signals the emergence of new intelligence in the world. But actually the Vedic perspective is that no, the emergence of the writing habit signals the deterioration of intelligence, and so they had to create a writing habit. So, among Veda Vyasa, a very, very exalted sage, was chosen to put all of this knowledge in a written form. And what did he do? Like say for instance, in today's world, if we were to suppose there is a professor of mathematics, and then we say that we understand mathematical knowledge is very important in the society, and so Professor so-and-so, you know advanced mathematics, can you come up with a plan how we can perpetuate and how we can teach mathematical knowledge in the society, because mathematics is so important. So the professor will say, okay, give me a month's time, I'll come with a plan. And then maybe after a month, he'll come back and say, I realize that mathematics is very important. So we have to teach mathematics at a very young age in life. And I have come up with a plan. I have got many others who will help me create textbooks. We will create a textbook for elementary mathematics, primary school mathematics. We will also create high school mathematics textbooks. We will also create college level mathematics. We will create graduation level. We will create post-graduation level. We will also create, journals for cutting edge research in mathematics or something like that. That's what a professor would do. Vedavyasa was doing something very, very similar. He was actually curating the entire corpus of knowledge that was prevalent at that time. And as a professor would do, from elementary to more and more advanced and to the most advanced level of knowledge, Vedavyasa did very much the same. He wrote the Four Vedas, which actually deals with how we can get the necessities of life in a righteous path, so that the world can have their requirements and also be regulated in their lives. So those were considered to be the elementary Vedic knowledge. Then he had the Upanishads, and which had more philosophical content, more advanced knowledge. Then some of these philosophical concepts, to appreciate better, to understand better, you need some kind of an examples of these things, right? Somebody who practiced those principles. And that's exactly what Vedavyasa did in the form of the Puranas. They were actually histories and narrations of great sages and great kings who had lived those elevated spiritual principles and concepts and how they handled different things in life. So he put all of them in the form of the Puranas. And then Vedavyasa was also a witness to what was happening between Krishna and the Pandavas and all of that. So he wrote that in the form of the Mahabharata. And after writing all of that, he wanted to next distill the most advanced aspects of knowledge, and he called that the Vedanta. Veda means knowledge, Anta means end or the ultimate. So he distilled that, and his most exalted work of Vedavyasa is the Vedanta. And he put that in the form of sutras. That's another interesting thing which I will not go into today, for another occasion maybe. So there were different kinds of formats in Sanskrit literature. Sutra was one of them, and he used the sutras to present the Vedanta, the ultimate of the Vedic knowledge. So now you see that how there is a hierarchy of Vedic knowledge, and Vedanta is considered to be the highest. What Krishna did in the Bhagavad Gita was he invokes the same Vedantic argument in a very succinct manner and presents it to Arjuna in a very short while. And when he hears that Vedantic perspective of life, now Arjuna is charged with a new understanding. I remember when I was in school, I used to read. I was told that when you learn quantum mechanics, you will get a new perspective, or you will have a new understanding of life. You look at the world in a different way. Of course, there may be truth to that. But of course, definitely when you learn from the Vedantic perspective, then you will get certainly a certain understanding of who we are, what the universe is, what all of this is. And that was the perspective Krishna presented to Arjuna. Arjuna was thinking that it's his personal problem. It's his personal family problem. It's a problem among the brothers, their Pandavas and their cousin. So his understanding was very limited. So he was thinking that how do we solve this, my personal problem? Now Krishna presented a new perspective. It's not just your personal problem. There is another purpose for this creation. And there is a certain purpose that why I have come to this world. And I have a certain larger purpose, a cosmogonal purpose, a purpose of cosmic scale. And I want you to play a certain role in that. And when Arjuna heard that kind of a perspective, he said, oh my Lord, this is what you expect me to do. In fact, someone may say, okay, it was a very unique case. Krishna was there, Arjuna was there, and Krishna presented to him a cosmogonal perspective of life and the universe, and then Arjuna woke up. In fact, in the 18th chapter, the last chapter of the Gita, Krishna begins to conclude in a certain way. And there are, Gita has many acharyas writing commentaries on that because this is very profound and it is pregnant with meaning. And you need help of acharyas who have actually perfected this understanding to help us. So there are a lot of annotations. They are called tika or bhashya in Sanskrit tradition. So these acharyas have written pointing out some of the statements that Krishna makes towards the conclusion of the Gita. Actually, what Arjuna went through, what Arjuna experienced, it was not that Arjuna was one lone fortunate person who had the advice and the counsel of Krishna himself, and we are all common mortals abandoned here far from Krishna without any opportunity to get that knowledge. No. There is actually, Krishna opens up a door in the 18th chapter and welcomes, and he says, each one of us can become as fortunate as Arjuna and understand this larger purpose and perspective of life and become involved in Krishna's cosmogonal purpose, that even now we can become participants and become involved and engaged in that larger mission and perspective of life. So these are some of the very interesting things that Krishna brings up in the Bhagavad Gita. And another way of looking at this is, if you carefully read the Gita, there are about 20 concepts that Krishna develops. Maybe 18, 19, 20 concepts. And he describes these concepts from different perspectives, and Arjuna gets clouded with some doubts, and then he asks him, and then Krishna further clarifies, and this back and forth conversation happens. And in this conversation, Krishna develops about 20 concepts, let's say. And then Krishna asks Arjuna to see the world and his situation and the world through the prism of those 20 concepts. And when Arjuna sees the world, his situation and the world through the prism of those 20 concepts, he now is charged with new energy and a new understanding, that he now sees that there is a higher purpose to the whole thing. So this is exactly what Krishna did to Arjuna. And if we also get to learn and understand and appreciate these few concepts from the Gita and see the world through those concepts, then we get another tapestry of reality that we become aware of. I mentioned about 20 concepts. The first concept that Krishna talks about, I will not go into the 20 concepts. Don't have to fear, it may take a long time. I'll just mention about the first concept. The first concept that Krishna talks about is understanding of our identity. of who we really are. Who am I? What is my identity? Earlier we were talking about purpose in life, and Krishna, I'm saying, begins with identity. In fact, going back to that article, that essay by the two professors, they say, at its core, your leadership purpose springs from your identity, the essence of who you are. So there is an important link between our identity, understanding of our identity, and the purpose of life and the purpose of our creation and so on. So spirituality begins with understanding of our true identity, of the essence of what we are. Because we usually go around leading a life or of our own, having a self-definition of ourselves as it is crafted and taught to us by the environment around us. So we need to revisit this at a very fundamental level to understand who we are. And that's how Krishna also begins to explain about who we are, the core of our being. How does this understanding of the identity and the purpose of the universe come about? What is the relationship? You see, the first thing is that we all would like to define our personal purpose. What is the purpose in my life? And what is the more elevated, sublime purpose that I can have in my life? Then naturally we are all part of a certain family. Then we will think of the purpose of our family. Then we are part of a community. We can think about the purpose of the community. And then on a bigger scale, purpose of our country. And then our country, and then global purpose. And expanding it further, there is a universal purpose of the universe. Now, usually what happens is that all of these purposes individually that we have and collectively at different levels, all of these purposes come into conflict with each other within our lives. And also because we all function as individuals, each one of us having our own individual conceptions and purposes, all of these concepts will conflict with each other. Suppose there is a lake, very nice, tranquil water, and I go and throw a stone. My stone will create ripples. You go and throw another stone. Your stone also will create ripples, and the ripples your stone created and the ripples my stone created come and clash and interfere. If I were to throw a stone at one point and you come and throw a stone, your stone, at precisely the same point, then the ripples that my stone and your stone creates don't interfere. They only reinforce further and expand. That's the difference between misaligned purposes and a very aligned purpose. Now we are talking about individual purpose, collective purpose, global purpose, universal purpose, and all of us having that one single purpose, if we can align that. This is the perspective that spirituality brings. How we can align. There is a wonderful formula, there's a wonderful understanding by which my own personal purpose and the purpose of the world and the universe can all be aligned with this new understanding. And hence we can have a very harmonious world. Spirituality gives a framework that harmonizes and aligns all of these purposes, personal to the grand universal purpose. Now, obviously, that understanding is not there today in the world. And as a result, we have created a very, very messy situation. I'm sure you are familiar with this study. A group of scientists did this study, and they said, if the whole world were to embrace Western standards of living, like, the American standard, the European standard, like the developed nations standard, the levels of consumption and all of that, the study pointed out that we will need 4 earths for us to manage. And obviously we have just one, and is also in bad shape. So it very clearly indicates that this is not a sustainable civilization. I came across another study which said, in the last 20 years, we have become more environment conscious in the world. Even the younger generation, they're all talking about environment. The younger generation is also very conscious of ecological degradation that's happening. This study pointed out that the environmental degradation that we have brought about in the last 20 years is greater than the degradation that we have brought about in the last 120 years. This study also pointed out, imagine, so all this degradation has happened in the last 300 years or so. Let's imagine, for instance, if human race ends now for whatever reason, hypothetically. So we don't degrade and mess up the world anymore. For the world to come back to its original state, it will take 300,000 years. So the mess we have created in 300 years, Earth will take 300,000 years to come back to its pristine state. There's another awareness, you might have read about this. Microplastics, and how the microplastics, you might be aware that plastics are dumped in the oceans, and they found there was one place where plastics had aggregated from the Pacific Ocean, and they found that the quantity of plastic that was aggregated, it was twice the size of Australia. And what scientists had not predicted was that in salt water, plastic dissolves and degrades in a certain way, and the fishes, and it gets into the live system there. And then when people eat fishes, and those fishes are actually carrying those microplastics, and that enters into the human food chain. So all kinds of complications that we have never had anticipated. So the world is in a very bad state. We need an alternative perspective. We need an alternative narrative. We need to infuse some new understanding about this world. This conventional understanding will not work. Just a week ago, I was talking to one very successful corporate professional. I think he's from one of the IIMs in our country. He was telling me, he knows us well, and he was telling me, Prabhu, I tell you, growth is an euphemism for greed. We talk about growth, but actually it's another word for greed. But that's what the world is all about. If the GDP is going down, everyone becomes alarmed. Governments change because of the GDP story. That's the way it is. More and more consumption, more and more exploitation. Are we going in the right direction? Is this the best way? Can we have a world with clean water, clean air, clean earth for our next generation of people? The current understanding, the current perspective will definitely cannot promote that. We need something alternate. We need an alternative. Now, when we talk about spirituality, I'm sure for many of you, seeing my robes and seeing my attire and all of this, a thought may come to your mind. What is the connection between religion and spirituality? About 7 or 8 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I was talking to one gentleman, and then I didn't know him much, and then I was supposed to travel with him for the next 2 hours or so, and then I was supposed to talk to him, and I was not too sure. And then first time I heard this expression, now of course it's very, very common. He said, I am not a religious person, but I'm a very spiritual person. That was the first time I heard, and it was not very clear to me what. And then I began to understand. 2 years ago, I attended one annual gathering of AAR, American Academy of Religions. It's a very big academy. They meet once a year in different parts of America. Mostly about 10,000 religion scholars come together and have a 5-day conferences and seminars and all of that. And so 2 years ago when that happened, I came across one entire panel discussion about a new movement that is emerging in the Western world. It's called the SBNR movement. SBNR stands for Spiritual but Not Religious Movement. So, very understandably, people are now more interested in spirituality and not religion. Because I remember once I was traveling with with a guy, and then this guy, big white guy, looked at me up and down, and I was small when compared to him. And then he said, are you some religious guy? And I said, yes, I'm a monk from India. And he said, oh, you know, I served in the American army for some 10 years, 12 years or something. And when I was in the army, we studied a lot of history. And one thing we found was that 90% of the wars in the world were fought because of religion. And so I became an atheist. And so on. So this is the kind of an understanding a lot of people have. Religion brings conflicts to the fore, and then there is wars and all of this happening. And we see that even today around the world. So I was in one conference a year ago in Italy on comparative religion. And I was presenting some of the ideas from India. And there was a gathering, and there were scholars from Christianity, Jewish tradition, Islam, and all of that. And we were all talking about comparative religions and all of that. One thing I found out was, their talk was that, you see, if you take different religions, you cannot help it. There are differences in these different religions. The way they look at things, the prescriptions for religious conduct, and all of that. And their whole dialogue, their conversation was around that we must recognize that there are differences and we must learn to respect these differences. That's a more civilized way of living. I told them that I disagree with you and we have a different perspectives that we want to bring to you from India. And so they said, what? And then I told them, actually, the core of every religion is spirituality. But very often, the spirituality is not understood and it is not appreciated. And people focus on the differences. We must understand how these different religions came about. 2,000 years ago, when Jesus was in Nazareth and Jerusalem and all of that, or Prophet Muhammad in other parts of Mecca and all of those days, cultures did not coexist. There was no communication between each other as it is today. With few rupees, I can make a phone call to somebody in America. It was not possible those days. So these great teachers of religion taught religion in those isolated cultures and geographies, and in a certain language, and hence taking into considerations the audience that they were addressing, they had to present that core spirituality with certain practices which was more practical and possible for that section of people. One happening in deserts of Arabia, another happening in some other parts of Israel and Nazareth and all of that. It was very, very different. And they had to teach as much. Suppose I'm a mathematics professor. I know a lot of mathematics. And you take me to a primary school and you tell, and there are 100 small children, second grade children. And then you tell me, Professor, can you please teach some mathematics to these children? And I may know very advanced mathematics. Now I'll wonder, all small tiny kids, what do I tell them? Obviously I can't teach them advanced mathematics. I'll tell them there is a basket full of 2 apples and there's another basket of 3 apples and I put all the apples into one basket. How many apples are? Maybe the children can answer that question. Right? My talking will be a function of my audience. I adjust my talk according to my audience. All of you are very elevated people, so I can speak very elevated topics to you. So, in the same way, these teachers of religions, of the ancient traditional world religions, they were very, very spiritually elevated, but they could teach only to the extent that the audience could appreciate. In fact, there is one statement in the Bible. Jesus says, I have many more things to tell you, but you are not ready to hear them. So, these religions, the core of all of these religions is the same spirituality. There is a higher purpose in life. We should not be greedy. Life in this world, as we know, to maximize the pleasures is not the be-all and end-all of life. There is something much more. There is an understanding of transcendence. There is an understanding of the experience of transcendence. And that is the core. And that's common to all religions. Differences are in the practices. So, there is the core and there is a peripheral aspect of every religion. And the peripheral aspects may be different between different religions. So when I presented this idea to those scholars of religion. They were not very happy. They said, no, we don't want to. Our religion is your religion. This is, and then they are different, and we should just appreciate the differences and lead a life and go on with respect to each other. So, what we understand from Indian perspective is that there is a spiritual core, and that's that core is what is very, very genuine and common to all religions. Almost time, I think. What was the time limit? Sorry. With question answer. Okay, I'll be conscious. You may also know there is one famous scientist. Some people say he's famous and some people say he's infamous. Richard Dawkins. And an English scientist who passed away recently. And he wrote a book about his own life, his experiences. And he called that book An Appetite for Wonder, the Making of a Scientist. And his whole book was that about how he grew up and in colonial Africa, and then later on in Oxford and the family. And that appetite to wonder about the world was the one which actually made him a scientist. I was reflecting on this idea that an appetite for wonder makes somebody a scientist. And then, when I started thinking about spiritual concepts, or scientific concepts for that matter, there is one idea I want to share with you. Maybe you are familiar with this, what is called the fine-tuning of the universe. Scientists have recognized there are about 24 constants, very fundamental constants, like the charge of an electron, the mass of an electron, the gravitational constant, speed of light, and so on. Scientists recognize that these 24 constants are so critical. There's one study which says that if any of these constants were different by 1 billion billionth, that is 10 power minus 18, if they were even little bit different, we would not have the Big Bang and the evolution of the universe and the emergence of life the way it is today. So they call this the fine-tuning of the universe. It looks like the universe was fine-tuned to come about. Somehow these constants were fine-tuned and the universe has come about. So when you look at these kind of things, and I must share another small story. I know a family in Mumbai, and I had visited them some years ago. They are a South Indian family, and they were very pious people. And so the young husband and the young wife, they were talking to me, and they said that, Prabhuji, we have brought up our children very, very, we have a puja room, we take our children, we told them they should chant some shlokas and all of that. But now our children have grown up and they have become teenagers and they are asking all kinds of questions and I'm not able to answer them. And so I told them, sometime, I'll find something. And then just as we were talking, the doorbell rang and then they went and opened the door and two energetic teenagers ran into the living room. And then the mother said, come here, talk to see the Prabhu. You ask all those kind of questions. No, you asked. I could see they were from good school and probably high school. And and then they were very shy, obviously. And then the mother said, no, you ask all your questions. And they didn't want to ask. And then the mother told me, restated their question. They asked me, Prabhuji, they asked this question, why should we pray to God? And so I was thinking, how do I tell these energetic teenager children going to probably some international school or something? And how do I tell them? Then I asked them, if somebody gives you something very valuable, very interesting, very wonderful, something that you like it, and then somebody gives that to you and presents that to you, and you receive that, you accept that, and then what do you say? And they said, thank you. Good schooling. And so I told them, suppose I give you something very valuable, very interesting, very important for you, something that you like, and I give it to you, and you accept that, and then you just walk away. What do we say that? And immediately the younger one said, bad manners. Then I told them, in the same way, God has given us so many things. The water we drink, it's not, municipality didn't create the water. It's a water that was already there. They brought it to our doorstep. The air that we breathe, the earth from which we get all the food, all of these are God's creation. And we get all of these things. And if we take all these things and accept all these things, and we don't even say thank you to God, what do you call that? Then it was clear to them. So I told them that prayer is a form of thanking God and being thankful and being grateful to God for providing all these things. And then I began to explain a little more to the parents, and they were also hearing and all of that. You see, anything you use in this world, you actually have to pay for it. I'm sure all of us have mobile phones, and every month they send us a bill, and if you don't pay the bill, a connection can get terminated. We use electricity in our homes, we use water, we have to pay the electricity bill, the water bill. You are staying in a rented house, you have to pay the rent to the landlord. You stay in a hotel, you stay for 3 nights and come out, as you walk out, they will give you a bill. For everything we use, we have to pay. But look at this. The oxygen that we are is so important for all of us. Did anyone give us an oxygen bill? Did anyone give us a solar bill to pay? Even the water bill, as I said, it's the cost of bringing the water. The cost of water is not included in that bill. So we get all of these things free. Not just that. We don't realize these things. How important gravity is for us. See, gravity is a very interesting phenomena. It keeps keeps all of us on this surface. If the gravity did not exist, all of us would be rising up like helium balloons. And if you have to sit on a seat, you have to buckle up, and you can't walk easily. The gravitational force is a neat thing. It brings us all, and then we can only have to worry about the horizontal movement. And it's not just that there are many. We have right amount mix of carbon dioxide and oxygen here. You see, when you fly in the aircraft, when you are at about 30,000 feet, sometimes we have heard the pilot mentions that outside the aircraft is flying, the temperature outside is minus 20 degrees Celsius. And inside we are maintaining the cabin temperature for your comfort at 25 degrees or something like that. Sometimes I've seen outside the thing, and there is a lot of bright sunlight. It's bright sunlight, but minus 5 degrees, 20 degrees or whatever. Although there is sunlight, there is no temperature there. There is no heat there. That's because it's very rarefied. But back on Earth, when the flight lands here, it's at 25 degrees, 28 degrees or whatever. It's actually because of gravity. There is a blanket of atmosphere, and that atmosphere has a right quantity of carbon dioxide and oxygen. Carbon dioxide has the property of capturing heat, the greenhouse effect. The right mixture of carbon dioxide and oxygen and the right gravitational force, which is creating because of that, we are all happily breathing. Did we ever pay a gravity bill? You see, there's only one person who gives and gives and gives and never asks us to pay in our lives. We have all experienced. That's our father and mother. Did our father come and give us, my dear son, my dear daughter, last 22 years I have been taking care of you, here is the bill, please pay up in the next 1 year. It's only our Father who gives and gives and gives and never asks us to pay. In the same way, it's our Supreme Father who gives and gives and gives. And we take, and then He never asks us to pay. So, I was describing these things to these children. And so there is this spiritual vision, this spiritual perspective about how all these things have come about, what's the purpose behind all these things. Like anything we do, there is a certain purpose. If God created this world, what was the purpose He had in His mind? If God created all of us, what was God's purpose? What was His purpose? What was in His mind for creating us? Can we understand that? Can we know that? Can we align our lives with God's purpose? Can we align our societies with God's purpose? Can we align our nations? Can we align our world? Can we align earth? The way we manage and we go about dealing with earth with God's purpose. These are the subject matter of spirituality. Unfortunately, we all have a certain bias. I'll just close with one example of a bias that I went through, my own personal example. Some years ago when I was in college, a few decades ago, when I was in college, for the first time I read in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describing this world. It is made of panchabhutas. Bhumirapo nalo vayuhu kammano buddhirevacha ahankara mitiyam me bhinna prakriti. Krishna says this world, there are 8 elements. 5 are bhumi, apaha, analaha, earth, water, fire. Being Indians, all of us know these things, panchabhutas, right? We have all heard about it, we have grown with it. So when I read Bhagavad Gita and it's saying that this world is made of 5 elements and there are 3 subtle elements, mind, intelligence, and ahankara, ego, and all of that, the first thing that came to my mind was this is very primitive. Look at science. See Gray's Anatomy. You have got endocrine system, cardiovascular system, nervous system, skeletal system, digestive system. This is more sophisticated. Look at Indian systems. This is just Panchabhuta. It's made of 5 elements. What's this? So this was always bothering me, but and then after a little while, I began to reflect on it, and then it dawned on me. You see, suppose there is a fair going on, and I go to the fair, and I look at all the different things in the fair. Oh, and I'm thinking, I should bring my family to this fair. They'll also have a good experience. Then I look at some things and say, oh, this, my wife will like it. I should bring her this weekend. Oh, this one, my children will like this. I must bring my children this weekend. Then I look at something else. Oh, this, my mother will like it. She will also, there's something for her also. Then I go home and I tell, I had been to a fair and I saw this thing, that you will like it, this thing, you will like this thing, the children will like it. Let's go this weekend. Right? And they all will get excited. Oh, that's good. We'll all go to the fair. So suppose, instead of a normal man with a family wanting to induce the family members to come to the fair, suppose I'm a municipal tax collector and I go to the fair. And I look at the fair. Oh, have they paid the advertisement tax here? Oh, here there is some entertainment going on. Have they paid the entertainment tax here? Oh, here there is something else. Have they paid this tax? So if I'm a tax collector, I'll analyze the fair in terms of the tax collection opportunities. If I'm somebody, I'm trying to induce my family members to come and see the fair, I will analyze the same fair in a different way. So our analysis is dependent on the objective of our analysis. When science is analyzing this body, The purpose of science is that if any part of the body breaks down, how to fix it and make it run again. That is the perspective of science. When Vedic philosophy, Indian philosophy is analyzing this world, analyzing this body, the purpose is to understand what is making this body tick. What is that force which is animating this? Like today I'm standing in front of you. I'm speaking. I'm using my vocal cords, right? And that's vibrating. And I'm creating sound vibrations here. And that's falling on your ears. And you're making sense out of it. If I make one grammatical error, you will make out, right? All of us are, how our brains are working. If I pronounce a word wrongly, you will make out. We're so sensitive. All of this is happening. Now, I'm standing before you, talking and all of this. Now, if, for instance, there is a heart attack, suddenly, I can't even stand, I'll just collapse. All of you will say, oh, something happened to him. Right? There is some force that is actually animating this body. And when that force leaves, even though the vocal cords are there, you can pump some air and create some kind of make it vibrate, and maybe it will create some sound. But it's not the same. There is something that is making this. So what are those things? Even today, science is grappling with that. There are many, many different kinds of versions and different theories. Science also does not have a conclusive, concrete, clear, unambiguous answer to these questions. So, there is a lot of wisdom, there is a lot of knowledge. That's very, very our own. We are very fortunate that this knowledge was actually developed and cultivated in our country. And so we can benefit from this knowledge, and we can share this knowledge with the world. We can implement this knowledge, and this knowledge can govern our lives. It's not that I'm giving a call to return to some kind of a poverty-stricken life or something like that. These are all wrong stereotypes that we have been told. Like I gave the example of how when I read Panchabhutas, the kind of, because of my science upbringing and learning, there is a certain kind of a bias. So we have a lot to learn from this spirituality, and this knowledge and science of spirituality was most rigorously explored and understood and developed in our country. And with this knowledge as the foundation, we can build another kind of a civilization, which is very progressive, which takes care of all the necessities of life, and can have a happy life. So there were kings who were suffused with this knowledge. There were merchants who were suffused with this knowledge. There were teachers and professors who were suffused with this knowledge, and they gave a certain blueprint for the organization of the society. So this knowledge has that potency, has that potential. It's not that the spiritual knowledge is meant for the temples alone. It's a knowledge that's meant to influence everyone. Krishna was speaking to whom? To a warrior who later on became a ruler. He was not a sannyasi. He was not a yogi. And after hearing that knowledge, he didn't go to the Himalayas. He used that knowledge to govern his kingdom. So this knowledge has that potential. It has to be understood properly and applied. And there is a lot of value to this. With these few words, I'll just conclude my talk. Yes. Sure.
So if any question answers, we can take up next 10 minutes. So any questions?
Namaste, Swamiji.
Namaste.
I had read it somewhere that we choose our own life. Is it so? And subsequent questions, if we do choose our life, then there has to be a purpose for which we choose that life. And then when we are born, then that purpose is ours, or is it God's purpose?
Okay.
That's my question.
Yes, it's an interesting question about we are born, do we make choices or things are deterministic? We can alter, we can make changes in our life. Actually, our life is a combination of choices and certain things determined. The example that's given is like a cow tied with a rope to a peg in the ground. So the cow can move around in a circle of that radius of the length of the rope. Within that circle, the effect of the rope doesn't exist at all. But when the cow tries to move beyond the circle, it's pulled back. So our life, when we come into this world, we are in a combination, in a situation where we make new decisions and we can alter certain things. There are certain things that is also predestined. So our life situation is a combination of the two. Like I'll give you an example. If I ask anyone the question, why are you wearing a certain dress? And you will say that, no, I bought this, somebody bought this for me so that it looks good, or some reason like that. So we choose the dress that we wear. In fact, all of you, I'm sure, or some of you, maybe very young, have chosen your spouse. Maybe certain constraints were there, but you chose. The car you drive, the job you have, you chose those. The house you live in, maybe some constraints were there, but you chose that house. So you see how we make choices in our life. We choose our dress, we choose our homes, we choose our profession. Again, with some constraints, we choose our cars we drive, spouses, and all of that. But now I'll ask you a question. Did you choose the parents to whom you will be born? We did not choose. Please. Okay. Now you're bringing a certain philosophical perspective to it. I agree. Yes, it is not accidental. Like, I tell this one very famous story. Please be seated. One very famous story. You will all relate with this. It happened a few years ago. I was reading the Times of India newspaper, and it carried on the top, what's his name? Facebook guy? Mark Zuckerberg. Right? Mark Zuckerberg. There was a story that he had a child. And then he and his wife, there was a bundle in his hand, very happy. He and his wife were posing, and then it said, Mark Zuckerberg is worth so many $1 billion. Now he had a child, and so on. Just on that same page of Times of India, at the bottom, there was another picture of a young woman. She's holding on to the hands of somebody who looked like her father. And that father was also holding a bundle in his hand. And they were wading through knee-deep water. And the caption said, this mother gave birth to a child in a maternity home in Chennai. There was floods in Chennai. And the maternity home got so flooded, they told her to go home. And so they were wading through the traffic filled with water and trying to find their home. So look at the contrast. One child is born in California in a family with billions of dollars. So another child is born in Chennai whose mother and father cannot even afford simple basic maternal care. Now, of course, we give this example. The thing is that it's not arbitrary. There is a certain law behind all of this. The way we are born in a certain family, all of that. There is a certain law behind that's operating. But we are not so, from a modern scientific point of view, that law is not understood or appreciated. Right? So in that sense, yes, there is a definite law that says that somebody is born in a certain family, someone is born in a certain... the skin color, of course the skin color should not matter. I hope my children will grow up in a society where the skin color does not matter, but the merit of the person matters. Something like that. Martin Luther King said something like that. But even in America, it matters today. Supposedly a very civilized and educated society. Even in that society, skin color seems to matter. So, skin color we did not choose. The gender, did we choose? Did we tick a box? Do you want to be born as a boy or a girl? Did we tick that box? None of us did. So, there are certain things which are determined. Now the question is, what determines these things? And there is a law behind it. And I won't go into those aspects of the thing. That's one of the concepts in the Bhagavad Gita that I was referring. But there is a very interesting reasoning behind these concepts, these laws, and how to appreciate and how to understand. I'll not go into that today. So like that.
Any last question? We can take just one more question.
Please.
Sure. Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I just want to know why this case of SBNR is evolving so much in despite of having so much rich religion throughout the world. But then the cases are evolving much more higher now. Why do you think, what's the key reason for it?
Yeah. I would think there are multiple, at least a few reasons maybe. One reason is that like the American Army man I mentioned, that maybe there are reasons that they, again because of a wrong narrative, that all the wars are attributed to religions. I would say that it's an unfair analysis, because it is not because of religion, it is because of the misunderstanding of religion that has led to wars. If you see the enormous solace and tranquility and meaning and purpose that religion has brought to many people, it more than counters the ill effects of religion. Again, it is not ill effect of religion, it is the ill effect of the misunderstanding of religion. The second reason I would think is, as custodians of knowledge, religious knowledge, custodians of spirituality, people who practice and profess and teach religion are expected to have very high standards of morality and ethics. It's a fact that our profession has had some very bad examples. And because of that, people have become, there's a certain kind of, what's all this? These people talk about all these big things, after he goes, we don't know what he's doing. So yes, that's a fact. It has happened. You cannot deny that. So we should learn from good practices from the for-profit world, I would say, to the religious organizations. Our organization should be more transparent. Our organization should be publicly accountable, so that both morally, financially, ethically, we are more accountable to the society, because we are custodians of this knowledge. So younger generation have become very cynical and skeptical about these kind of things. So I think these are some of the complex sociological issues that have caused that kind of a SBNR reaction in the world.
Thank you, Speaker Sir. It was very insightful. Now may I request Professor Mahadevan Sir to give some closing notes.
Prabhuji, Chanchalapathi Dasa, and the genuine seekers of this knowledge. After we have very good food, we should not spoil the taste with something else. So to honor that spirit, I'm not going to talk much. I just want to make only one observation. Every one of us have a certain riddle to solve for ourselves. And the riddle is a triangle of Jiva, Jagat and Ishvara. We want to know what is the connection between these three. In a way, spirituality is that. How do you connect these three? There's a Jiva, an individual. There's a Jagat, there is something around me. Today, at this point in time, that something is here. And there is a force of transcendence. I think Prabhuji, in about an hour and 10 minutes, so beautifully he gave us a very nice perspective of this, connecting these three edges of the triangle, and I think that's what spirituality is all about. We are extremely blessed to have this. I just want to add only one more sentence. I think the Indian notion of spirituality puts a great emphasis on who than how and what. I keep hearing this, I also keep making this observation. If only Newton asked who fell the apple, apple fell. And instead of how it fell, he asked how the apple fell. Prabhuji gave an example of Einstein and all that, so I remembered this. So since Newton asked how the apple fell, he became a scientist. If only Newton chose to ask who fell the apple, he would have become a Brahmajnani. Because that is what spirituality is. There is a lot of self-interest. This who is a very profound question in life. When events happen in life, we bother too much about how and why and all that. Please bother about who, then you become spiritual. I think he brought it so nicely. I don't think I can put it in any better way. I must thank our PGPEM students here. They have done a wonderful job of organizing this. And we are indeed privileged and blessed to have Prabhuji here. So on behalf of the IIMB community, let me also express our sincere gratitude. I know he's very busy, he travels a lot. Akshaya Patra is such a wonderful, this is the only organization which I think presents the books of accounts on 3rd April or 2nd April, I do not know, and get an award also for that. The professionalism that he talked about is what they actually practice. They are very busy people, but it is out of their kindness and keen desire to share this knowledge. Prabhuji has come here. Thank you for all that. Thank you.
So now I request Professor Sir to please felicitate our speaker with the Angavastram. So Tulsi plant. So we have a small prasadam arrangement outside, and that would be we'd be opening for interaction. There are a lot of senior personnel here with a lot of spirituality background. Students, please feel free to interact, have your questions clarified, and maybe before we close, I also request our PGPEM chairperson, Shri Gopal sir, just to say few words or thanks notes, kind of a closing note, please, sir.
Hare Krishna. I think I must remind you the logo of our institute, Tejasvina Vaditamastu. I think all of you today must be experiencing that. There is no better way. And when Professor Mahadevan's elective came and the student community came to do the event, I was very happy. And it's a student-created event. May I request you to give a big hand to them. The inspiration, of course, is Professor Mahadevan, the teachings, but that also talks about Tejasvina Vaditamastu. I think ISKCON and Prabhu Chanchalapathi ji, we can't ever be thanking you enough. You are doing so much for the nation, but our institute is blessed. We are all blessed that your presence is here, along with your Prabhuji's sannyasis here. I also want to thank Professor Mahadevan, because one of the things we have started doing last couple of years is the spirituality through the courses he has been teaching. Started as a discourse freely. I came, attended, he may not remember, with a couple of my friends 10-15 years back. Now it's become a very popular course among MBA students, to the extent that Sandeep requested and Professor Mahadevan had to specially do for this group who are mid-career professionals. Just want you to know they are doing very well in career, but the seekings, you said it's not, spirituality is not dying, these people are very eager, and all of them took the elective without any. So that's also, the spirituality is re-enlivened as they're reinventing themselves. So that's what the mid-career MBA program is. It enables people from different spheres of life to come. Earlier it was PGACM, now it is PGPEM. I'm not marketing the program, I'm saying these people are re-entering to reinvent themselves, and nobody other than Prabhuji could have re-inspired them to recreate a life of a S-curve. So a lot of thanks to the students. I just want to also tell that you see the support staff who are there. You know, admission interviews are going on, lot of activities in the institute. We are a #1 institute, lot of activities, no time. Professor Mahadevan doesn't have time, nobody has time. CEO is here. So all the support is there to make you all experience this Tejasvina Baditamastu, the evolution. Finally, I'll want to end with, I think, Vasudeva Kutumbakam. I want to end with a sloka, which is very time immemorial for our country. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani paschyantu, ma kasya dukha bhavet. So this world, let it be a better world. That's what Prabhuji is trying to inspire. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gopal sir. Just one request from student side also, like with the popularity of this course, MPPG, now onwards it should be part of the core course. So with that, I think we are coming to a close of this wonderful auspicious session. So prasadams are outside. Please have this interaction more meaningful. Thank you so much.